All right, now joining us in the broadcast, we have got Professor James Russell, who's an associate professor in the Department of National Security Affairs at NPS, where he teaches courses on U.S. foreign policy, military innovation and national security strategies. Joining us live from Washington, D.C. Professor Russell, thank you very much indeed, sir, for joining us here on WION. And let me in fact start off by asking you this. You know, the fact that the B-2 bombers have been moved from the Missouri Air Base to Guam in a very highly publicized manner. And the speculation is doing the rounds that they could, of course, be used in a possible strike on Iran. In your assessment, you know, before a strike is carried out, is the movement of these kind of carriers so highly publicized?
Well, typically in situations like this, you have the movement of units which are intended as quote-unquote signaling mechanisms, by which that's international relations speak for the idea of conveying intent. So the idea behind the deployment, of course, is to convey intent not just to the Iranians, but also to the Israelis. So I think the drama that's going on here, which is behind the scenes completely in the United States, because in the United States, we don't get to have a debate about this kind of thing. It's the pressure being brought to bear on President Trump by the Israelis and the Israeli lobby. The real question is going to be here is whether Trump is going to stand up to the Israelis and stand up to the lobby. I think it's the lobby and the Israeli government which is going to determine whether these strikes go ahead, which is another way of saying whether the United States decides to go to bat for the Israelis, who, I might add, have no discernible theory of victory in this war. They can't force Iran's regime change. They can't force Iran's unconditional surrender. They can't bomb Iran's nuclear program out of existence. It's simply impossible. And so the question really is the United States going to be sucked into the attempt to bail out the Israelis' lack of a theory of victory, so to speak? There's no way for the Israelis to achieve their objectives. And I would respectfully suggest to you and your viewers that there's equally no way for the United States to do the same. I don't care how big the bombs are on the B-2s that could drop onto Fordo. That's not going to win any war. It's not going to achieve any discernible political objective. It's only going to create more problems. I wish I thought Trump and the people around him had a grasp of these strategic realities. But instead, it's not the strategic realities of the circumstance, I think, that are shaping the American choices. Right. It's the influence of the Israelis and the Israeli lobby. And how do we know this? You know, how do we know this is happening? It's that there is no debate in the United States about this question because the major media outlets are terrified to take on this question of the American-Israeli relationship. So the silence is deafening. Are we seeing any hearings, for example, on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee about any of this? Of course we're not, because they don't want to have a debate. I would respectfully draw a contrast to your own country. When India and Pakistan were in a dust-up, this was a couple of weeks ago, and there was a very active public debate over what India should do in this kind of circumstance, in which, in the sort of view of many, they had been provoked by the Pakistanis with these asymmetric sort of attacks. Right. The point I'm just trying to make here is that in a country like India, there was an active and open debate over what the country should do. And Modi, took a decision and he de-escalated and worked with his counterparts. We don't have that in the United States today. Major media outlets are terrified of raising these issues because it involves the Israelis and the Israeli lobby, which is this taboo subject. And it's guiding American strategic choices about when and in what circumstance to go to war. And I think it's a terrible thing for the United States to be sucked down the drain into this war where there's no theory of victory.
Right.
There's no theory of victory for the Israelis, and there's none for the United States. Should it
I
decide
think,
to enter.
Professor Russell, I think you've made a number of important points here. Just about 4 days back, Donald Trump had put out a post on his social media where he wanted nothing less than an unconditional surrender from the Iranians. And a couple of days later, his tune completely changed because the Israeli pressure on him was to intervene militarily. But then he said that he'll make a decision in about 2 weeks' time. From going from demanding an unconditional surrender to saying that he wants to give negotiations yet another chance and will make a decision in 2 weeks' time. Do you think Donald Trump is being advised by his military advisors that at this moment, looking at what the Iranian ballistic missiles have managed to achieve on cities such as Tel Aviv and Haifa, getting a victory is not going to be a straightforward walk in the park for the Americans?
Well, it's clear that the United States cannot impose its military will on the country of Iran short of using nuclear weapons. It's just not possible. What's the United States? What are our options here? Are we going to land the Marines at Bandar Abbas and have them march on Tehran? It's nonsensical. There's no way that the United States can enter into a real, actual war with the Iranians and hope to have any chance of success. The Israelis are in this conundrum right now. There was all this, feel-good assessments about how great the Israelis are doing and how they have control over, Iranian skies in Tehran. Well, I've got news for you. The Iranians are plenty capable, and they're prepared for the long run. And the question is, are the Israelis? There are these stories now about how they're firing off their Iron Dome anti-missile defenses, which cost more, of course, than the drones that are being fired in. Israel is not winning this war. This is, again, a fiction that's been created somehow in the West by the Western media about how well the Israelis are doing and how great their equipment is. And we get to see all the gun camera footage on on your television station and others of things blowing up, which everybody thinks, oh, wow, isn't this must be great. The bigger picture is much more complicated. Israel is not winning, right?
This is something that probably the Israeli leadership is aware, because when Operation Rising Lion was started by Benjamin Netanyahu, one of the key calculations that he was hoping on is that once this war starts, he was hoping that the Americans would immediately jump in on the bandwagon and fight alongside the Israelis to defeat the Iranians. It is day 9 of this war. It is the 10th night of hostilities, and the Americans haven't jumped in yet. In fact, Yoav Gallant, the former defense minister of Israel, has written a piece in the Times where he said, effectively, that Israel has started the war and he now expects the Americans to come and finish it. Do you think the Israeli expectation that the Americans will now come and finish this war is likely to come true? Or will Donald Trump, by kicking the can down the road for about 2 weeks, wait it out to see as to how the war progresses?
I think we know how the war is going to progress as it is currently constituted, which is to say, both sides are going to start running low on ammunition at some stage of the game, and it's going to peter out into a de facto stalemate. That is what is going to happen. And we can have all the gun camera footage we like on this, but the reality is that the Iranians are going to keep on sending their missiles into Israel and vice versa. It's not going to achieve a decisive strategic result. So, of course, the United States then is being called upon to solve Israel's problems, solve Israel's lack of strategic acumen in deciding to launch this war. Again, based on specious claims about Iran's nuclear capability. The United States will be no more able than the Israelis to impose its will on the Iranians through air power and missile strikes alone. I don't care how big the bombs are. I don't care how many missiles we're choosing to fire off. It's not going to happen. There's no country in the world that has ever been brought to its knees through air power alone. It hasn't happened, and it's not going to. Netanyahu is playing Donald Trump like a violin. He's tempting him to go into the war, and of course the lobby in Washington D.C.
Right.
And its corporate donors are working overtime. You can bet that they're working overtime, and that the telephone calls are coming into the White House thick and fast from the donors demanding action. Sheldon Adelson's widow has contributed millions of dollars to the Trump campaign. She was at the inauguration. There were pictures of her there. She's just one of many, right? The lobby has seized control over American foreign policy in the Middle East. This was clearly the case in the Biden administration. Biden had essentially outsourced American foreign policy and strategy to the Israelis. And for Trump, it seems to me it's more of the same.
Right.
He does not have stomach for a fight with the lobby, a bruising fight with the lobby on his home turf over this. So he's really between a rock and a hard place here.
Right. Professor Russell, I need to ask you one quick question before we let you go. The fact is, Donald Trump campaigned on the promise of putting America first. He called himself the president of peace, the president who will end the forever wars the Americans seem to be getting embroiled into. Now, there are very high-profile influences within the MAGA camp who are ardent supporters of Donald Trump, who are telling him that this is not an American war and this is an Israeli war, and America would do well to stand out of it. In your assessment, can Donald Trump keep his MAGA flock together, and can he prevail upon the people who are suggesting that this is not an American war?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head. As usual, the WION commentators get all of these nuances very correctly. President Trump is being pulled in different directions. On the one hand, as you correctly comment, his domestic political base liked, and I would agree with his domestic political base on his basic philosophy of withdrawing the United States from these military commitments. Great idea. But on the other hand, the real sort of epicenter of American foreign policy over the last sort of quarter-odd century, of which the Republicans sit in the midst of this, are the neoconservatives.
Right.
And the neoconservatives are all committed to the idea of the United States intervening militarily whenever it wants, wherever it wants, with whatever weapons it can bring to the fight in the attempt to solve localized and regional political disputes. Now, all of these interventions, and I capitalize A in all, have been unmitigated disasters, right? But do you think this has stopped the neoconservatives continuing to make these arguments, of which the lobby is, of course, an important part of this, right? And the answer is no. They continue to make these arguments that, all we do is drop a bomb on Fordo. It's going to solve all our complex strategic and political problems. And it is complete and utter nonsense. I don't know of any other way to describe it.
I think you've touched upon several important points. They will have to see as to what decision Donald Trump, of course, makes. He's kicked the can for about 2 weeks now. And we need to see as to what happens in the war in the interim. Thank you very much indeed. We're completely out of time, Professor Russell, for joining us with that perspective there.
Thank you.